First of all, we'd like to thank everyone for being with us here this afternoon, joining us for the conversation dealing with AI and innovation transforming the Caribbean. We have a fantastic panel that has been curated by COSTAATT's VP of IT and Digital Transformation, Kevin Ramsoobhag, who will also be our moderator here for this morning. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, the Innovation Café series is a series that is put on by COSTAATT every month. It's usually the last Wednesday of the month, at which we talk about something, a topic, a theme that is relevant to the Caribbean and the Latin American region. In the past, we have covered topics including innovation, recidivism, climate change, and today we are discussing AI. I will now pass you on to Kevin Ramsoobhag, who will provide some welcome remarks and then introduce the panelists and kick things off with the presentations.
Thank you, Jowallah. Good morning, everybody. Kevin Ramsoobhag is the name, and I'm welcoming you to this Innovation Café series. It's a groundbreaking one. It's about AI. AI is that hot topic for us. So I'm really excited about this particular one. We have some exciting speakers for you. I'm just going to introduce our speakers. Just to run through our session this morning, we'll have an introduction of the speakers, and I'll move into one of our speakers giving a short presentation, and then we'll jump into a panel discussion. All right, and at the end of it, we'll have some questions and answers from you all. All right, so without further ado, let me introduce our first guest speaker, Dr. Rohan Jowallah. He is a proud son of the Caribbean whose journey from humble beginnings has taken him across the globe as a respected educator, AI researcher, and international speaker with over 30 years of experience in education spanning the Caribbean, the United Kingdom, and the United States. Dr. Jowallah remains grounded in the values of community, access, and inclusion. He is passionate about using artificial intelligence to transform education, especially for those who are often left out of the conversation. His work focuses on inclusive and ethical education, and he has delivered more than 100 presentations worldwide. Above all, Dr. Jowallah believes in living a legacy that uplifts, empowers, and opens doors for the next generation. Because when one of us rises, we all rise. Dr. Jowallah, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, sir. And if we could get the slide up, then I'll start.
Before we go into the presentation, I'm going to introduce our next speaker, and then we could go into the presentation. You're ready and we're ready to go. That's very good. Our next panelist this morning is Arlington Akogo. And Darlington Akogo is a highly influential global leader in artificial intelligence, serving as the founder and CEO of 4 companies: MinoHealth AI Labs, Cara Agro AI, Runmilia AI Institutes, and Gudra AI Studios. He has been recognized as one of the global top 100 most influential people of African descent in healthcare. He currently chairs the topic group on AI for radiology under the United Nations World Health Organization, the International Telecommunications Union, and Global Initiative on AI for Health. In addition, Darlington serves as the chair for the Working Group on AI Economy for Africa Union and created the AU-AI Continental Strategy. And I hope to hear about that strategy as we go through this presentation. He also serves as the Global Innovation Advisor to the International Development Innovation Alliance, an alliance between the top 15 international development agencies in the world. These include Rockefeller Foundation, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, UNICEF, and of course, much more. Darlington, welcome. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you for having me.
Excellent. So as we go into our session today, I'm going to open the floor for Dr. Jowallah to jump into that presentation, and then we'll go into our panel discussion. Dr. Jowallah, I'm handing over to you.
Thank you very much. I must say I am happy to be here. I want to say that I think I'm a son of the Caribbean, yes, but also I am very much involved in the Caribbean. I was in Trinidad for some time. I met Kevin there and we had a wonderful relationship back then and still now. And as I look at my pictures regarding Trinidad and Tobago, I often wondered if I'd stayed there, how the landscape would have changed my life as well as the context there. But when I look at it, I want us to think about another 10 years down the line where you have a student or an educator or someone who is in their mid 60s, they're using AI. They're using AI because they now have the knowledge. And because they have the knowledge, they're able to move along with systems. It is not like Silicon Valley in the Caribbean. The Caribbean is unique that it can create a space, that it can grow, that it can develop. But there are some fundamental things that you have to consider as you navigate the space. And I want to bring that into the limelight today. Now, there are so many issues that we could address, but I want to just focus on 5 dominant areas and provide an idea about possible strategies that we should. And the base of my conversation and my thought today comes from over 30 presentations I've done in the last 2 years. And I've spoken to multiple institutions regarding AI. As a matter of fact, I do sit on a few committees here and there. But I want to start off by allowing us to think about access. Access is going to be important. If we are going to leverage artificial intelligence in the Caribbean, we must have good internet connection, we must have infrastructure, and of course, we must have access to these technologies. And I know when the hurricane strikes in the Caribbean, sometimes it's problematic. COVID also showed us that. And within that context, are you hearing me? I heard a feedback, sorry about. Within that context, we have to think about education and critical literacy as it relates to artificial intelligence. Notice I'm not saying AI literacy, I'm putting the word critical because it's important. As we're using AI, we have to understand the data sets, the transparency, and we have to understand how potentially it can be harming to us all. And by doing that, we have to educate the users at all levels. That's fundamental. So if we are going to set the stage, we have to also think about the bias in AI systems. You know, you always hear people in the Caribbean and across the world saying, you get what you put in artificial intelligence. The issue is you get back what you put in and more than you can expect of the biases, the reproduction of certain theories and philosophies we get back. So therefore, we have to think about how we're going to navigate the economy of inequality in the digital divide. So therefore, if you don't have access to the tools, if you're not using the software and these technological tools, how do we have access? I did a research with a set of teachers in the Caribbean the other day, and from that group of 270, only 1% have subscribed with their own funds to getting a tool. Others are just using the free tool, which is also questionable regarding that. And if we're going to navigate the space, we must have policies that are going to be enacted or presented to ensure that everyone has access. Everyone from those emerging into the classroom at the tender age of their early childhood until it reaches a point that you're supporting adults. The other day in Jamaica, a question was asked, how do I tell someone that is 65 that what they're watching is not real? This was an older woman talking. So we have to navigate the space. So let us take another 4 or 5 minutes to look at the concept of what we need to do. We need to really invest in infrastructure of databases and of course, connectivity. If you do not have connectivity, you can't have the AI product you want. The other day when OpenAI went down a bit, everyone in the United States were asking, how do I get to do my job? Which brings me to the point of critical thinking in the era of AI. So we have to develop training that, okay, we're going to teach people the skills necessary, focusing on education and training at all levels. We're going to train the farmers, we're going to train those who are in the medical field, and everyone will be involved. So that's a way forward. Education and critical AI literacy, looking at the power dynamic that is displayed, of course, in AI. And then we have to promote ourselves by conducting research. Research is fundamental. A lot of individuals are pushing out research now from Europe and United States, and I know the Caribbean is emerging. I've seen some literature in that area. But we need to understand the framework on which the Caribbean will set its foot on to ensure that we are researching a sort of AI research that focuses on inclusion, that focuses on ensuring that our histories are preserved. We have to think about ethics, how we are going to navigate the space where we are, of course, in a position that our dominant tools are now linked to societies such as America and Europe, because we need our own. So it's going to take investment. And when we talk about the last point, 2 points I want to highlight is the establishment of inclusive governance. What does it mean? In the United States, they have been quick to outline certain guidelines, but no essential policy has been handed down. As a matter of fact, something changed after Biden left, and of course, it shifted the system. We have teachers in the Caribbean that will now just use a tool without considering the issues of data protection and privacy. And why do we need governance? That's a question, and I'll give you an example. 3 months ago, a worker that worked at OpenAI created a sentry weapon. It is an automatic rifle that can fire rapid rounds per second. He developed it using OpenAI system. It gave voice commands. It means that if that individual took that rifle to a location and said to the rifle, I want X person in that population to be targeted, then what would we have? We would have people dying because guess what? AI was able to be programmed that way. And that is what I'm saying is if you have guidelines, some people I've heard people saying, you need to have strategies for AI implementation, but no regulation. And I'm saying to myself, I need it to be regulated to safeguard my own self. And the example I gave with OpenAI, I'm not going to stretch it any further, but just imagine the possibilities of having those tools, that algorithm that is dangerous, that algorithm that can cause discrimination, that can exclude, that can reproduce the sort of ideological philosophy that we tend not to want, that can divide our society. Hence, we need governance. That's essential. And let us not forget, I see in Trinidad too, and Jamaica and a few other countries, where there's support coming from local private sector organizations. Several of them have joined together with government to ensure that there's a framework for that, because they know they need a workforce to ensure that they push beyond the boundaries of where the Caribbean is. I want to say that the Caribbean has a lot to offer. We have individuals ready to step back to help the Caribbean move forward as it relates to moving the AI agenda. And I think with CARICOM coming together and all government agencies navigating the space collaboratively rather than competitively, rather than competing, we are in a position for better way forward. As I wrap up this slide, I want to say that if we are to move, we need to ensure that there's access, that we approach AI from a critical literacy AI perspective, and we use and develop data sets that are like us, that understand our position, our histories, and so forth, and ensure that everyone has access to digital technology. Even when they're going up in age, we're developing these skills. And with this, with a strong policy, the Caribbean can advance, but we must be flexible enough. We must be able to navigate the terrain, because the next big wave is going to be something that is quicker, more efficient. And I would say at this point in time, we are in a position of readiness. So let's get ready. And I give back 8 seconds.
Dr. Jowallah, thank you very, very much. Very thought-provoking presentation. You touched on access. Access is something that we think about, but not oftentimes we put things in place to ensure that that access is proper. You talk about governance, and some of these strategies I know we will touch on more during the presentation, during our panel discussion, but I really, really appreciate you sharing these ideas with us, just opening our minds to what is possible and some of the things that we need to start considering. So really appreciate that. All right, so let's jump straight into the panel discussion, and thank you for giving me back that 8 seconds. I really appreciate it. I want to bring Darlington into the conversation and start off with Darlington. Darlington, are you available? Let's see your video if you have it. Okay, excellent. I'm seeing you.
Okay.
Hearing you as well. Wonderful. Darlington, thank you. Let's start off this panel discussion and move right into that, and then we could take some questions at the end. So Darlington, I'm going to direct this first question to you, and then of course, Rohan, you can jump in, if you have any ideas to share. So we just heard about some of these strategies. You shared some of these strategies, Rohan, but what strategies can be used to ensure that AI innovations directly benefit Caribbean communities rather than being dictated by foreign interests? And Darlington, I'll take you first with that one.
Okay, yeah. So thanks for having me. This is a very, very important, timely discussion in the context of everything happening around the world, especially when it has to do with AI, but also the geopolitics around AI. So the interesting thing about that question is that the answer, or at least one part of the answer, is within the question, what strategies? Is that there need to be strategies, right? So you need to have national, regional strategies where you spell out what are your priority areas, right? So no one lives in a silo, no one works in a silo. You need partners and everything. But if you do not set out what your priority areas are and they come on board, then they get to impose their priority areas on you. So you need to have national strategies, you need to have regional strategies that states that, okay, for Trinidad, Tobago, for Barbados, say Kitts, for the entire Caribbean region, CARICOM, whichever aspect, and there could be multiple levels of this strategy, right? And you say the areas we are interested in specifically is healthcare.
We seem to have lost Darlington for a bit. So you started off talking about some of these strategies. Then he'll come back on, but Rohan, do you have any thoughts? Your mic is muted.
When you look at some of the strategies, I think you have to think about community-based strategies too, because I think that's going to be important. And we have to look at it now, where are we getting our stuff from at this point in time? And we're getting it from, let's say, for instance, Europe and America. Now, if we are to develop our strategies, we have to really consider how are these databases influencing our political movement as well as AI. He spoke about the issue of geopolitical, and we are in a system now where we see so many things happening in relation to that, and we have to be cautious about the language models that we are adapting and moving into our system, and that creates a problem as it relates to that. And again, we can see where databases are being tainted by political ideologies, and that's influencing the Caribbean too. For example, when you rename something that historically is known in our history book as the Gulf of such and such a place, we have the problem of saying, how do we navigate these spaces? And it's going more than that, Kevin. It's revising our history, and our history is plural that we have done and try to articulate over time. So that becomes problematic. So I think the strategy is going to be one of education, is going to be collaborative, working together with Caribbean people globally. And you're going to have, of course, what he indicated, national strategies that moves on to local, and of course the grassroots. For example, grassroots is just showing how the farmers would maybe cultivate using artificial intelligence and that sort of stuff, whether it be a drone technology, irrigation technology, using AI, studying the weather and navigating those spaces. So I'm going to say that overall, there should be a holistic approach in using AI and not just a sole approach to say what you're going to focus on education, but education for all in relation to AI.
And some of it you touched on in terms of, that community strategy. How do we make sure that the community strategy is aligned to what is happening within the country and within the region, and of course within the context of the world, right? So that community strategy, I wish Darlington is back with us, but I saw some of his work integrate using AI to help with farming and agriculture, and making sure that agriculture is done differently using that AI technology, just understanding the soil, understanding the type of plants that could be placed in these types of soil at a farmer level. Some farmers know that, but not everybody is aware of that. So he was able to take that AI technology and infuse it, and through pictures, just picture of the soil, and you get a feedback on what type of soil it is, because all this big data is available and could be infused into to the AI models. Yes.
Yeah, I do have a friend of mine who is in Nigeria, and she got a funding project based on irrigation using AI technology. So I'm saying that it's moving there. Yeah.
So let's move on to the next question I have for you, and this one is actually direct to you. So how do we prevent AI from reinforcing socioeconomic inequalities and ensure it benefits, reaches grassroots communities in the Caribbean? So we started that discussion, but now how do we ensure that the grassroots are affected well?
One thing we have to ensure that we don't reinforce these inequalities that I mentioned earlier is that we need to set the infrastructure that can accommodate. For example, we're talking about AI, but some communities might not have a reliable electricity. They might not have a reliable internet connection. And of course, as a result, we might need to say, all right, how are we going to leverage private and public sector working together?
Your microphone is off. I think it was
Sorry.
correct.
So one of the issues that we might want to navigate to is understanding that, and I'm going back to critical literacy, because we need to train teachers to demystify the issues that are associated with AI, and we want to empower students, because in order to move beyond, we have to educate students to understand the power of AI, to leverage it. And I don't think we are at that point yet. And that is why I'm looking at that. So we have to also support community projects, as we mentioned earlier, as it relates to agriculture project and so forth. But moreover, we need to have governance. So we need an AI policy that would leverage economic aspect as it relates to AI, as well as a social aspect. And that can be done from a national or Caribbean aspect, right? So we're looking at how will CARICOM AI task force leverage and help countries to move beyond the boundaries of just having the basic framework, but of course having a collaborative framework. But let us look at the social impact of AI. And I think that's important. If we are to leverage AI in such a way that it's maximized, we have to understand that the algorithms that we have now and are using are not transparent. We have to understand that the education or the information that is produced, by AI might not be true. So as a Caribbean nation coming together, we need to kind of articulate the need for ethical use of AI from educators and individuals using it too. And also we have to ensure that we have a cultural history that is sort of harvested by us using our databases that we have. Because what you'll find out is that individuals are going to scrape information from the net might not be true, and of course it will be presented as true. Remember, information is not always factual. And I want to say that as we leverage artificial intelligence, we need to kind of think about redistributing some of the wealth around. And why do I say this? Some companies will maximize their benefits. And if they maximize the benefits of using artificial intelligence, I think it's fair enough to give back to the people some of the money that you gained. It means since you use my data to learn about me and then to sell it to a company, I should have a stake of that holding to give back to me, whether it be health, education, or social development funds. I think that is so much It's so important because you took my data, you sold it, and now you're taking more away from me to the possible of me losing my job. So I want to say that there's going to be a need for the redistribution or taxation as it relates to companies who have maximized artificial intelligence to ensure that we have social justification for that, as well as we have some economic benefits within the Caribbean.
No valid point. Darlington, welcome back. Can you hear us? Yes.
Yeah.
I wanted
Sorry about that.
So we'll come back around in a second for you to finish that initial thought that you got cut off on, and then we'll come back around. But you know, Rohan, this idea of an individual being compensated for their contribution to an AI model, it's not something that I would have thought of before. It really is something interesting for us to consider. How do we create an infrastructure to be able to support something like that? It's something I'd like to have with a conversation on, how do we build something like that? How do we allow persons to be able to share what they want to share into these models and then use it? Because we have persons with information willing to provide that information to build models, but they have no avenue, and they are very aware that some of it might be used not the way that they want it to be used. So they're not sharing. So how do we build that sort of infrastructure? That thought we'll have some further conversation on it. But Darlington, I'm just circling back around to you to discuss, some of the strategies. I know you started to talk about the curriculum and whatnot. So I just want you to finish that thought, and then we'll jump into another question directed at you.
Sure. So yes, the point I was making was that with no one is a silo. You can't do things alone. You definitely need to work with bilateral and multilateral partners. But then if you don't start out with a strategy that you have defined yourself, if you have a blank slate, then they would come in and impose their wishes upon you. So it's best to essentially have a strategy that actually spells out, sorry about that, a strategy that spells out, sorry, let me just.
That's an interesting thought, Rohan. Starting off with a framework that you would have developed, and make sure that framework is what is guiding you.
Yeah.
Yes, Darlington, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry about that. Just wanted to keep the noise. Yeah, so essentially, you have to have those priority areas defined. If, for example, what is important to Trinidad, Tobago, St. Kitts, what is important to CARICOM, the ECCB, you have to state out saying that I care about healthcare, I care about tourism, agriculture, and I want the specific use cases in AI. I want AI systems that will help me to be able to diagnose diseases, to help me do all these things. So then if you bring in foreign partners, it could be, international development agencies from the different countries. It could be the US, it could be Europe, you could bring in World Bank, whoever. They are coming on board to align with your national, regional strategies. They are not coming in. But if you don't have those strategies, those official document that says this is the things that you want to do, and then also have implementation plan, then they are going to impose their wishes on you. That is the key thing there. But the other end also is that, like they say, whoever pays the piper essentially is the one that decides the tune. So you also have to have skin in the game, right? You can't allow your AI implementation to be entirely funded by foreign partners, right? You need to put your own skin in the game. I mean, right now, right, as we're speaking, we're working on Ghana's national AI strategy, and it's the same thing that we're essentially telling government that, yes, we have all these development partners coming on board, but you have to create a national AI fund from within. And then you can then have propositions that say, we bring this amount of money and all these international development agencies can match the amount that we are internally bringing. But then you can't have a national AI strategy and then all the funding that goes into the implementation come from foreign partners. then you don't like they imposing their wishes on you. It doesn't work that way. So you have to have your own skin in the game. Yeah, those are the ways that you set out those priority areas. Because yeah, once you define it, you create your own fund and you invite partners, then you get to pick and choose who aligns with you. So if any foreign partner does not want to follow through with your national AI strategy, at that point, to be honest, for diplomatic reasons, it's very difficult for them to disagree, because that will imply that they are challenging the sovereignty of a country. But then again, if you don't have anything as a blank slate, then they can definitely impose their desires more so on you. Yeah.
That's a valuable point, Darlington. Having skin in the game, it's something that we've learned over time, as a Caribbean people, making sure that we are really invested. We are invested not just emotionally, but also financially invested into the different projects that we go into. Because once we have that type of investment, it means that things could be directed, the way we need it to be directed. So that's a very, very important point that you raised there. Thanks for that. And you touched on some of it with my third question going into, what opportunities exist for AI-driven healthcare, tourism, agriculture, and other key industries in the Caribbean. I want to direct this one at you because I know that you are doing work in healthcare, tourism, agriculture. I know that you're doing work now, so you could probably share some of those findings with us.
Yeah, so there are several use cases that can be looked at. One key one in healthcare is that you can have AI systems that serve as medical assistant to health workers. The issue, and this is a global issue, is that we do not have sufficient number of health workers. It's not limited to just the Caribbean or just African or global South, it's a global problem. To achieve universal health coverage, we need 40 million additional health workers. And that's going to cost the world so much money that we do not have. In the Caribbean, this is the case. I just had a conversation with an official from the Caribbean literally just hours ago, and they made mention that when it comes to certain specialists on a number of the islands, it might be the entire island, there's only one neurologist. It might be just a handful of specialists that can look at, let's say, very extreme or rare cases of cancers. So when it comes to oncologists, so in those instances, AI presents a solid solution. This is not theoretical. Literally today, we're already implementing this in a number of countries where we have generative AI systems that have been trained with data collected from different parts of the world. They've been trained to be able to analyze medical text, medical images, medical numerical data, so lab data, genomic data. So you can then have this AI system essentially be a clinical decision support system, but not clinical decision support system as we existed decades ago, but much more advanced one that can support screening, diagnosis, treatment planning, prognosis. And this is an implementation we're actually doing in partnership with a number of countries, even within the Caribbean region. So we are kickstarting this with a number of Caribbean countries where we are rolling out this generative AI system. It's called Moremi AI. We've already started rolling out a number of countries. So it's a single AI system that can support several medical tasks across all the things that I mentioned. Agriculture also, you have solutions when it comes to improving on-farm productivity. You have AI systems that could be used to detect diseases and pests, right? You have AI systems that can, so you can integrate AI systems with drones, fly the drones, and they could pinpoint where the diseases are, where the pests are. This is actually something we are working on with some development agencies. And then also there's yield estimation. So you can have AI systems that will predict yield. And when I mentioned disease and pests, it's very interesting because we met in St. Kitts, right? One of the biggest issues St. Kitts actually face is pests. But in this case, their pest issue is not tiny insect, it's monkeys. So the monkeys originally did not belong on the island. They were brought in by, the colonial powers that came in there. So they naturally do not have predators. So they have ballooned and they destroy most of their crops, most of their yield. So one of the things, I think when we met right there at the workshop, we showcased how we could use the AI system to detect monkeys. So that's actually one use cases that is relevant to at least in kids. It varies from different island to island. So that's just in healthcare and agriculture. In tourism, there's a lot of things that you can also do leveraging AI to improve the experience. You could have AI chat systems that would make it essentially be an interface to tourists. Anything they want to know about the country, if the AI system could look at, could basically generate personalized experiences for them, personalized places, or have recommendation on places they should visit based on their interests and all of that. So there's a lot of things that could be done. I also want to just give a shout out to, so the ECCB actually has been hosting this AI, generative AI boot camp. They did it last year. We were involved in it. They're doing it this year, where they train these young people across all the ECCB member states. And then at the end of the day, at the end of the workshop, the boot camps, the students actually build AI solutions, generative AI solutions across all the sectors that we're talking about. So last year, we saw kids that were showcasing AI systems that they built for healthcare, for agriculture, for emergency, for tourism. So there's a lot that is happening, even with high schoolers. It's already happening within the Caribbean region. So this is all super exciting work that should be very much applauded.
Thanks for that. Thanks for sharing that. And I could tell you, we have nurses, we have a nursing program where we graduate nurses, tons of nurses every year. And still, they can't meet the demand. We ship them all over the world. They're positioned all over the world, still can't meet the demand. And we have students coming in all the time at COSTAATT. And that demand that you talk about, where we could have medical assistants in place, really is a key space that we could jump into AI. And that second point, with regard to tourism, again, we have a tourism course that we have redesigned using AI, and how can AI help our local tour guides and tourism personnel to be able to share what is available on the island, and of course external to the region. So very good opportunities. We've started to use some of them already, but it's for us to start thinking about how can we use this technology to pair it with our challenges and make sure that we come up with great solutions. So I'm glad that you touched on some of those, Darlington. And the next one, I'm going to direct again to you. How the Caribbean nations ensure they have a voice in the global AI conversation. Some of it you touched on already. And that we are not just remaining consumers of AI technology. How do we do that? I know that you do it in Africa now, but share with us how can we do some of that in the Caribbean. And Rohan, I'd like to hear some of that from you as well. Then. Darlington, you first.
Yeah, so I think like the training programs you mentioned, the training programs done by ECB, those are all ways that you actually achieve this. So if you moving from a consumer culture to a producer culture is something that requires intentionality. It wouldn't just naturally happen. So making sure you're actually building the capacity where you have the young, especially most of these things are driven by young people because they have the energy, the vision, and they can see a better world, right? They don't like to accept things. So leveraging all that youthful vibrance and vigor towards skills in AI is one key way to do that. But also partnership comes in a long way. It's partnership that is not just geared towards, oh, let's go to US and go pick up something and bring it here. Or let's go to Europe and then go pick up something. But it could be partnership between Caribbean and Africa. It could be partnership between Caribbean countries where it's like, okay, what have you learned? What are we learning? How do we combine all of that to develop something that would help both locations? So yeah, for me, that's the other thing that I really focus on. The reason, so the question is how do you do it? But one thing we need to even look at is why do we need to do it? Essentially, where this trajectory is heading, we are creating something that is called AGI, artificial general intelligence. In a couple of years, we'll have AI systems that essentially can automate most work. When that happens, it's going to eat more and more into the global economy. What that means is that if we are just consumers, most of the global economy, which already sits in the US, is even going to move more so over there into a few AI companies. Because whether you develop AI solutions within your country or not, it's not going to stop people from using ChatGPT, right? So you either develop the solution that is needed for people within the country to adopt, or they're just going to keep downloading ChatGPT. And when they do that, and we keep moving more and more into this space where AI companies swallow up more of the global economy, what that means is that like government makes a lot of money from taxes. You're not going to tax ChatGPT, but ChatGPT is going to say officially we don't operate in your country. We're a US company and our platform is online. If you want to block people from using it, then block them. There's actually, interesting enough, a whole issue going on between the Nigerian government and Meta, the company behind Facebook, over this where they're trying to fine them for something, and essentially Facebook is saying, no, we're not going to pay that. We are not under your jurisdiction. So if you want to block it from within your country, you go ahead, but we don't care. And that's a country with over 200 million people, right? So imagine for the individual country. So which connects to the other thing. If we want to present a strong production front, we can't go at it individually, right? I think looking at it from the global context of we are all of African descent, from Africa to the Caribbeans, all of this. If you connect that, then we have a strong enough block that you can put next to something like China, next to something like, India, next to the US. So if we have a strong production culture as far as AI is concerned within that space, then it gives us a fighting chance. But outside of that, there are also strategic investment that need to be made into things like infrastructure. One of the key things in AI is GPUs. So you need to build compute clusters. Barbados is currently exploring building a compute cluster. We need more of this. Because if not, the other disadvantage is that you can be writing the code for the AI system internally, but all your IP sits on servers that are owned and hosted by countries way outside of your control. So we need to invest in compute cluster within the Caribbean region to then, once we train people, we host it, then you can have this whole flourishing ecosystem where we are producing AI solutions and not just consuming them from US and Europe or China.
Indeed. Thanks for sharing that, Darlington. And I know we have some questions in the chat, and we'll get to those in a second after this final question from me. And this one is directed to Rohan, right? So what ethical and cultural considerations must be addressed when applying AI in the Caribbean societies, especially given our diverse heritage?
All right, thanks for that question, Kevin. I think it's so worthy of having a response that asks the question. Language or makes a suggestion that language shapes our histories, it shapes our economies, it shapes our religion, and it shapes every aspect of our daily lives. Now, if we have a language model that is able to create language within the system, and we have algorithms, and I call them a sort of language that sends out information, that is bias, that reproduces hate sometimes, that does not consider the tradition of the Caribbean, does not consider the histories of the Caribbean, then what do we have? We have a system that is not going to be of us, for us. So technology does not exist in a vacuum. The algorithms dictate that. And when we are thinking about these things, there are some questions you have to ask when you're thinking about ethics and cultural consideration. You have to ask, where are these databases from? Where do they sit, as outlined by Darlington? Who are the engineers behind these codes? And what information have they put in to discriminate? Let me tell you, one of the hardest content that I can develop is content for the Caribbean. Regardless of how my prompt is developed, it comes back with something that's hurtful. The other day I produced something and it came back with a Confederate flag. embedded in that image. I was so scared, I took a screenshot of it. You ask it to produce something about an educational institution in the Caribbean and you ask it, listen, produce an education system that outlines teachers using AI. And when it comes back, the classrooms are outdated, they are not sophisticated, but you've asked them to replace that main character with someone that's white, it produces something totally different. It tells me that there's a bias in the data set and there's an expectation of how these data sets were created. And let me say, the issue of data sets and transparency, and you think about cultural relevance and ethical considerations, you're looking at historical things written, not from our perspective, from others that are now have been scraped, embedded, and being reproduced and repackaged. So when we ask things now, that's why we need to start. I still value those history books because you know what the issue of language is, and these algorithms, you can change them and change the system. Within a book, you had to publish. If a publisher produced 1 million, you had 1 million books saying the same thing. Now you can have different language models or extraction from these models that go beyond. So we need to ask ourselves a question to ensure that we are ethical, responsible. Who is the producer? Where are these data sets outlined? And we have to, how does it limit my cultural and my historical context? Is it reducing it? And how can I navigate that space? Because these are critical questions we have to ask. And by doing that, we can respond to the cultural issues that we must ask and understand the need for ethics. And I go back because I think someone mentioned about frameworks. I'm a framework guy. I have gone in depth with framework as it relates to ethics in education, and there are 40 principles that are categorized on the safety. It talks about inclusive design and so forth. And I go back to another point to creating a framework is essential, as Darlington indicated. You have to have your strategy and outline where you're going and evaluate that. But before doing that, you have to assess where you are. And that requires an organizational SWOT analysis, which I've already designed one that can be done. And I've designed an app that you could use to assess your organization in relation to that. But these are starting points. The answer to the question is you have to be critical, reflective practitioners of AI and evaluate every single line because the information presented is not always factual. And I'll stop there.
Indeed. Darlington, any thoughts on that?
No, I agree 100% with Rohan. I think it's unfortunately what happens is that getting data from, Caucasian or majority Caucasian countries is easier. And so a lot of these AI systems are built heavily on that. Then unfortunately, the data that they have that represent the rest of Earth, the Caribbean, African, and then other communities, is essentially all the bad things that they want to highlight because that's mostly the times that they feature. So unfortunately, a lot of these models have those biases. So to undo that, we need to invest heavily in building our own data sets. There's a lot of effort, and you can do this on a massive scale. I remember before we did an initiative where we collected large disease and pest data sets. Before we did that, the largest disease and pest data set had 100,000 images. We almost tripled that to 300,000 images, collected this from 4 different countries. It takes a lot of work, it's a lot of headache, but realistically, AI is basically data work. For our new age generative AI system, Moremi, we spent almost 2 years working on it. Out of those 2 years, we basically use like let's say 3 to maximum 6 months building the model. All the rest of the time was doing data work. So all of AI is data. So if you're starting with data that does not represent you, you're gonna get an AI system that does not represent you. So I 100% agree. Whatever values that are important to the Caribbean region, whatever the languages, the peculiarities in the languages, the cultural values, the representation that matters, the use cases that matters, it's very important to invest in data set around this. And an easy way of doing this is just if you start out with your priority areas and you say these are the areas I care about, you can just, the government can always just put out call for data set collection. So proposals, you just ask people that We want data sets in healthcare, looking at this set of use cases, in agriculture and tourism, and then have young people, young researchers collect the data sets and then make it publicly available. And that would unlock a lot of use cases across the region. Yeah.
Thanks for that. And if we're taking notes, I think general public should be aware that it starts with the data. We have to know what that data is, organize that data however best we can. But it really does start with the data. These models, they can't create themselves. It really depends on where we take our data from. And we have a lot of data around the Caribbean. We have a lot of data around the region. And that organizing of data is an important step, I believe, for us to start working on, so that we could start building these models. So guys, thank you very much. We have a few minutes again, but I want to get some questions from the audience, right? I have a question in the chat from Marlon, and Marlon is really talking about private models, right? He believes that private AI is the way to go for organizations, and he wants to find out, do we have any tools? Do you all know of any tools that could help build such private AI models?
Yeah, I can respond to that. So if you want to build private models, there are quite a lot of options. So one is you don't necessarily have to build. So if it's a generative AI model you want, you don't have to start from scratch. You can take an open source model, then fine tune it to your specific use cases. There's Llama. There's several options of Llama. There are small sizes of Llama that are all the way to 4 billion parameters. Then there are larger ones in the hundreds of billions of parameters. They even have one coming out called Llama Behemoth, which is going to have 2 trillion parameters. So there's several options. Outside of that, there's Mistral. Mistral has a bunch of models that are also open source. Even DeepSeek. So DeepSeek became all popular some months ago because essentially they built this very powerful AI system and then they made it entirely open source. So anyone can pick it and then you can fine tune it. But then also, so even with DeepSeek, they did something called distillation. So that's when you take the intelligence of a bigger model and put it into a smaller model. So there are small sizes of generative AI system distilled from the big DeepSeek models that can even run on the phone. So yeah, there's all these options. If you are looking at what's the name, image generation, there's Stable Diffusion, which is also open source. Outside of generative AI, you have YOLO for object detection. If you want to build a model from scratch, the algorithm behind all of these things is also open source. So that's the transformer architecture. It's open source. You can get the code on GitHub and then run it. So there's endless resources when it comes to doing all this work in an open source way, or at least taking open source and then building things that you can make private. You should always watch out for the licenses though. So not everything open source allows you to use it for commercial use cases. Facebook's Llama, they allow you to use it for commercial use cases. So far as you have less than 750 million users, DeepSeek allows you for commercial use cases, but some of the others might not. So just make sure you watch out for the licenses too as well. Yeah.
And to add to that, at COSTAATT, we were able to actually build some models for private use. One helps with our support, users coming in asking questions about the organization, courses, programs. We have an AI that really supports with that, and that has been very successful. We actually won some awards for that one. We actually building another model right now that is using our content. So it's an AI model, yes, but it's using our content. So students aren't getting content fed to them from the globe or from the internet or from anywhere else. It's really COSTAATT content. And those types of models really help us support our teaching and learning, help us support our potential students, or students who are currently on the ground. And these things were built using the data. So it really does start with data. It comes back around. The models are available, as Darlington mentioned, but it really does start with the data and having that data at your fingertips. Marlon also asked about any AI policy templates. Do you all have any AI policy templates to help us develop our own policies?
Education-wise, I can forward some to you. I think I've collected some over the period of time, and I think some are open source. So you can have a look at them regarding. I'll send over the link at a later point. But I do have some. As a matter of fact, I'm on the American College and Association faculty. I do oversee 3 universities, so I can share some information on that regarding the free open source information that they have.
Right. And we'll distribute
Yeah.
panels of persons who have registered through. We'll distribute that way. I see Kimberly asking about the workshop that we were a part of, Darlington and St. Kitts. You know, she just wanted some more details on that one. It was a workshop. It was a series, a resilience series. It's a 2-day event that allowed for coming together of the minds. But the 2 days was supported by months and months of, you know, reaching out to students and reaching out to different entities and getting them to submit these ideas in terms of how they are going to use different technologies to enhance what is happening on the ground. Some of it we saw at water distillation project, where it took, you know, general water and was able to convert that water in usable water. And it came from a young person on the ground. So we could share about that, information about that, but I think within our space now, within our context, we should be thinking about how we can do that within our communities, getting the communities together so that we don't have to go far to be able to be a part of such projects. You know, it's getting the young persons, as you mentioned, Darlington, getting those young persons who are eager and energetic, started to think about the challenges around them, and then coming up with some solutions. And then we support them financially, we support them with getting IPs and all of these things that, you know, we can support with as educational institutes, as bodies that are able to do that and start building from within. You know, so that is what could happen. So thanks for that, Kimberly. See a question from Darren. As we are all pushing digital transformation in the Caribbean, what AI innovations do you think will really move the needle for the economies over the next 5 years? So what AI innovations will help really move the needle within the next 5 years? And 5 years is a short time in terms of, you know, transforming economies, but what are some of the things that you all could see that could really help us within this space?
I just shout out to 2 points that I've noticed trends going on here. One is going to be the use of agents. Agents are coming, they are already here. The agents will book your flight, do your grocery. All you might need is an autonomous car to drop it off at your home. That's a possibility. And so I'm looking at higher education and the landscape. A lot of people are developing agents. We had ChatGPT custom built. You know, I've built 100 of those. Now I've moved on to agents because I think agents might be another way. I do see where technology is going to advance, that you're going to be having a sort of system where people can have their companion. I'm not 100% for that, because there's holographic technology coming on. Education is pushing that, where you can have a conversation where I can teleport Kevin into another space and he can do a presentation. A doctor could examine someone there by him just turning around and doing that sort of thing. So there's going to be innovative ways of teaching and learning. And I can see where, of course, the merger of a sort of digital world and space, that there's going to be global collaboration, instant learning, instant movement as it relates to getting feedback and so forth. And of course, the problem is higher level of surveillance. And of course, you might lose your ability to even hide under anywhere at all. So those are concerns, but there are things that are moving, and I think agents are going to be on the top priority based on conversations I've had with people.
Thanks for that, Rohan. Darlington, any thoughts?
Yeah, so I agree. I think agents are quite a huge area. Essentially, a good way of looking at it is, so what is happening now, there are 3 layers in an AI ecosystem. There is the application layer, then there's the foundation model or people who are developing the model layer, then there's the compute and infrastructure layer. So all three layers, usually what happens is that when a space is young, the infrastructure layer is where a lot of financial reward is. So you have the likes of NVIDIA, TSMC. NVIDIA at one point became the most valued company on the planet, right? It became worth $3 trillion. Right now, it's just falling slightly behind Apple and then maybe one or two other companies, but it's still very high up there. TSMC is also valued at $1 trillion. Then there was the next layer, which is OpenAI, Anthropic, and everyone, people who are developing the model. But we are seeing a transition also happen where the application layer, a lot of value is being created. So you have companies like Perplexity, where they don't necessarily build most of the models themselves. They use existing models. So they are using ChatGPT, they're using Claude from Anthropic. But what they are doing is that they've created an application layer of value on top of it. So they've taken those models and used them for other things. We are seeing this happen in a lot of sectors. So in the legal space, you have companies like Harvey AI. They are not building their own AI models. They're using existing AI models. They call them wrapper companies. But then essentially they take this and then they specialize it in specific domains. Klarna is using it for customer service. So that is the least expensive. As you go down the pipeline, the more expensive it gets. So from the application layer, you can create a lot of value. There's a company that created an AI system called Devin. They leverage other AI systems so that they use it to help you do coding. They were valued at $2 billion, even before they actually had any users. So you can create a lot of value at the application layer. So what you need to do is the sector that is of interest to you or the sector that you're familiar with, take it, look at all the tasks that are in there. The more you can end-to-end automate some tasks by leveraging existing AI systems. So try to do something within your application that someone cannot just go to ChatGPT and ask it and it will be done in a few seconds. So create some value on top of it. So if it is tourism, come up with an application layer that is leveraging existing AI systems, but maybe it's interfacing with specific databases within the country that you're in, specific, repositories, information desk or RAG and then retrieve that information so that the kind of value you create when someone goes to ChatGPT, they wouldn't get that. So once you can do that, you can unlock billions of dollars. It's already happening. So don't let the happy journey pass you by.
Thanks for that. And that question actually came from our Director of Information Technology, Darren Headley, and he's doing some of that work already at the college, using that application layer to build on. So thanks for that, Darlington. We don't have time for more questions. We're over the hour. I'm really grateful. What we can do is that we could share the questions, any other further questions that come in, we could share them with you and have you all respond to them and send those to you all. So gentlemen, giants, thank you very, very much for joining this conversation. It really, really was insightful. I want to hand over to our Vice President of Institutional Advancement to wrap us up. Yes, there she is.
Hi.
Yes.
Thank you very much. This has been a fantastic conversation over the last hour and 10 minutes. We really appreciate the contribution by our two featured speakers. And thank you very much as well, VP Kevin Ramsoobhag, for leading the discussion and curating the panelists, as well as the theme and the questions that we were able to participate in here today. Just a note and a reminder that our next Innovation Café series is taking place on May 28th. And we have another exciting lineup available for you. And with this lineup, it includes, pardon me, it includes a theme dealing with creative entrepreneurship, and we have 4 international speakers from the Caribbean as well as regional. So we would like to invite you to register and participate at our next Innovation Café series taking place on May 28th. Once again, it will be an online Innovation Café series. All right. And so we thank you very much, everyone, for being here, and wish you a very good rest of the day. Thanks you all.